Hey everyone, welcome back to Star Labs Confidential. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about the upcoming web series Starquake, and with us now is Jerry Peacock, one of the show's co-creators. Welcome to the show, Jerry.
Well, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, how did the idea for Starquake begin exactly?
Well, it started out really just with the main character that is Scott Wells, Alcor, in his superhero form. A buddy of mine is a comic book artist, and he's always doing commissions and artwork and various stuff like that. And I was talking with him. I was like, why is it superheroes always seem to have these incredibly conspicuous alter egos? They're the star reporter or the billionaire with a conscience or, things like that. And I was like, where is the everyday average Joe guy, the construction worker, the farmhand, who gets superpowers? And so we just started building a little character who initially looked a lot different than what he evolved into for the series. But as we refined the character and started talking about his backstory, I was talking to Ryan and I was like, what if we did this as a series? I had just come off of doing the Quest of the Muscle Nerd documentary and kind of just needed a new project. And so I was like, hey, there could be, this could be, something that people really relate to. Let's roll the dice and see what happens. So that was the genesis of it, and it's just kind of grown from there.
Yeah, from what I saw with the 8-minute short that you guys did, I was impressed with the physicality you guys brought with your characters, as well as for Alcor, Mizar, and even Orion, I think his name was, because I interviewed Derek last year.
Came together bit by bit, and we purposely left all the other characters flexible enough so that the people that were portraying them could put their own spin on them. Derek, he very much wanted to do where you had the two faces, where he was very shy and quiet when he's in his regular form. When he's in his superhero form, he's gregarious and he's over the top and likes to have a great time, and it really worked for his character and what we wanted to do with the character of Orion. Whereas we worked with Brian Martinez, who plays Mizar, to develop the character of Mike Martin, Mizar, and what traits did we want him to have and what was his background, because he started out very different from what I had in mind. And Brian is like, no, I want to do this, and this. And I'm like, yeah, that works.
Yeah, because with Orion, it definitely gave me Spider-Man vibes in terms of personality, for how Peter would start being all meek and quiet, but yet when he has the mask on as Spider-Man, he's all cracking jokes, trying to be funny.
Yeah, and I think Derek had mentioned that he took a lot from Human Torch in the original Fantastic Four movie when he is in his superhero form. So yeah, I don't know if you know, in the 8-minute short, he's only briefly shown in his regular form, and he's just kind of watching from the side. But he's got that vibe. I can't get involved. I'm over here. I don't want to make noise.
Yeah.
And then he's the one who shows up to kind of, in a lot of ways, save Alcor from himself.
Yeah, say for a fight between those two, they definitely need someone as a good referee.
Funny story with Mizar in the original short. If you've seen the test scene, you've seen him in his superhero form. And we wanted to have that transition in the 8-minute. But I had sent the costume to Brian, who lives in North Carolina, so he could wear it for some promo stuff. And it got lost in shipping.
Oh, God.
We were so mad. And it was right before we were going to shoot the 8-minute. I'm like, what do we do now? And, we got to talking about it, why does he even need a suit? He's the bad guy. They're all supposed to be an any man anyway, so let's just, have him wear his regular clothes.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, it kind of gives me a Green Ranger vibe from Power Rangers, like the original one. where he was like kind of evil, but then went to being good because he was mind controlled and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's for the character of Mizar, he's kind of the anti-hero, but he starts out as the bad guy's lackey, and he's seduced by the promises of power and glory and all that, because his backstory is he's a former prize fighter and was a big-time star, but he got an injury that ended his career, and he's very bitter about that he didn't reach the pinnacle of his stardom. And our bad guy Romulus comes in and says, now you have a new chance, you could be even more, charming and promising him everything. But we didn't want him to just be the lackey. This is just a guy who was susceptible to that influence. And so as the story goes along, there'll be, a development that kind of pulls him back. Mm-hmm. And he'll go from, that lackey role to more like, how do I get out of this?
Yeah, I would say for Mizar, it definitely gave me like anime vibes for how like they create like the hero and having an anti-rival, but then still have like someone else to be the main bad guy, whether it's like the mastermind or just someone new, but for the hero and rival to still like, clash heads.
Yeah, and that's just, all part of keeping depth with your characters. So.
Yeah, because like in Dragon Ball Z, like Vegeta, he was just the bad guy that eventually revealed to be a lackey for the bigger bad guy Frieza along the way. But then after that, he pretty much kind of joins force with them, but does his own thing.
Yeah.
So how much of like comics like Marvel and DC have helped influence with the writing, or was it purely original, so to speak?
Well, I've always been much more of a DC fan than Marvel fan. I like them both, but I kind of was always more partial to the DC aesthetic. And so when we were designing the look for all the characters, especially for Alcor, we're like, I want to say what's old is new again. And so the classic Superman image with the cape, the trunks, everything, let's use that. And let's, try and build that up with the character for his look, because there were a lot of design choices that were crucial to the characters, right down to their coloring. Alcor is very conflicted, always, and is always, why me and all this kind of stuff. He's always got that emotional turmoil. So he has that orange and red and gold coloring that always kind of are present when you're talking about conflict. Whereas Mizar, who's always got a touch of envy for people who have achieved other things, and he had that chance taken away. Well, so he's green.
Makes sense.
Looking at the DC, the Marvel, we could take elements from all of them that we weren't bound to any one ideology. Marvel, they've always got kind of the soap opera element with their stories, and DC, they're always kind of a little stoic, rigid, superheroes first, and Marvel's human first. But we're like, we don't need to be bound by any of that. Let's do, a story that is the best of two worlds.
Yeah, I agree, because with Alcor, it's like it gives me like a mixture, I guess, with Superman vibes, but also I guess Spider-Man in terms of personality, because besides with this, I can only think of Spider-Man in terms of how like he feels cursed with all this power, yet he just wants a normal life. He doesn't want all these responsibilities. But
with Scott, it's more like, oh, I never wanted this, but I'm stuck with it. So he doesn't try and force it away, but he doesn't just embrace it right out of hand. And he has always got to deal with the problems. That's one thing we said very early on. Like, how would you possibly keep like a normal job, a 9-to-5, if you were a superhero? You can't, if you have to rush off and save somebody, and they're gonna like, where'd he go? You're gonna get fired. So
yeah,
like, we can use that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, it only works unless you're like either a teenager, rich, or have the kind of job where they don't check where you've been.
And yet, so many of those jobs, like Clark Kent, is the star reporter. And nobody notices with these big stories where Superman shows up. Clark seems to have the inside track, yet he wasn't there.
I know what you mean. It's a good take, and I'm curious to see like where all 5 of you, I guess, kind of like come together and stop Romulus. That's the name of the bad guy, right?
Yep. And see, my character, S.T.A.R, see, because you have the 3 kind of mortal superheroes, and you have the 2 celestials, as we call them. And my character is S.T.A.R, and he's not an alien per se. He is a human manifestation of the positive energies, in the universe. Prior to them getting sent to Earth, they didn't really have a physical form. They were just the energies in a coherent state. And Romulus is, of course, the negative. And through, for their own stories, they begin to discover what humanity is, what it means to be human, and how it affects them. For my character, they both arrive in the late 1930s. We had said that we don't want them here for like thousands of years. No, they need to discover in the short term. And so S.T.A.R, comes to Earth, and as things progress, he's learning, regular experiences. He has a chance to fall in love and have a child, but he experiences tragedy because that wife he has dies in childbirth, and the child dies only moments later, because this is kind of the 50s at this point in his story when that happens. So he better understands the human condition than Romulus does, who, being the negative side, succumbs to greed and ambition and hatred. So yeah, it's like I said, it's their own journey of discovery.
Interesting. So I guess it's like, I guess you could say it's like cosmic beings of like a pure energy that decide to give themselves like human-like forms just to experience.
Well, it wasn't just random, because they had to come to Earth. The story arc, we have an event called the Great Convergence, and it's sort of like they have to be here to monitor that event, because if it doesn't go off right, it could destroy their entire universe.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Samurai Jack when they did like an origin for Aku, how like before Aku was himself, it was just a big blotch of pure darkness, but these gods try to get rid of it, but only one sliver of it survived, then crashed on Earth, and eventually that little sliver regenerated and then became Aku.
Well, I'll take your word for it. I was never hugely into anime. I mean, I know some. I've seen Akira, and I've seen Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that, but I didn't really get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Oh, Samurai Jack, that was like purely like Cartoon Network, like made here in America. But that it's still anime influenced a bit, but
What they take from that.
yeah, but it's definitely a unique way. It's like mixture of like Western style storytelling, but with the wandering samurai instead.
I love a good blend. And for our story, like the character over Orion, you have Mike Martin, Scott Wells, or Mizar and Alcor, who live in this big city called New Arcadia. And then you have Orion, who is Andy McFiles, who comes into the city because he is just a farmhand, a simple country boy. And it's a little bit of fish out of water there. And so he brings to the table, just a whole different personality dynamic. He's not hardened by, the atrocities of the big city. So he has that innocent quality to him. I love, when it comes to storytelling, mixing opposites. You've got hope, you've got despair, you've got, experience, you've got innocence. You put those things together and it really makes for great conflict.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to ask. How do all three of them get the powers?
Well, Alcor and Mizar, it's the same event that happens with them. It is hence the title. It was a starquake, which is a real thing. Just like we have earthquakes, stars have quakes as well, and they send out huge amounts of energy when that happens. And in our story, that energy makes its way through this cosmos and hits Earth, and they happen by purely random chance to be the two who get hit with that energy. Scott is up on a high-rise, doing riveting construction work, basically, and Mike Martin is on the roof of his gym trying to fix the air conditioning because he has no money to hire someone to do it. So they both get blasted with that same energy. And also, it's what keeps them inextricably linked, because Alcor and Mizar as stars are a binary star system. And so, the thought to say, okay, these two are stuck with each other because of how this event happened. Whereas with Orion, he is the one-off. Even Romulus and Achenar didn't know that was going to happen, but it was a jet of ionized gas, the same scenario, been traveling through space from the Orion Nebula, and he gets hit with it out on the prairie one night while he's tending to a cow that's calving, and so he winds up getting charged and made into a superhero. But it makes his powers, his abilities, and his strength levels different from theirs.
Interesting. But I like that little bit of a nod to how it relates to with the stars and with assistance with the characters' names. It's not just because before you say, I'm not that knowledgeable with the subject, so I figured with these names it's just I don't know, I figured it'd be something from Greek mythology or something. But
that's simply we just simply took the names of the stars and the stars that had an effect. The pivotal sequence of events in their lives, they get made into superheroes. Well, they take the names of the stars that made them into that. And Achenar is another star in the night sky. Romulus, of course, is a star in the night sky. Orion is a nebula, but that's why he's different in so many ways.
Yeah, that's good. It's because I say for Alcor and Mizar, they're opposing forces, much like your character in Romulus, and Orion's I guess a neutral third party.
He's representative of that. As big as the universe is, it's something unpredictable always happens. So they knew, Romulus and Achenar both knew that energy was going to hit the Earth and somebody was going to be affected by it. They didn't quite know who, but they knew this was coming and this was happen. It's just kind of a a pre-action of that great convergence event that we had talked about. But they didn't know about the nebula gas with Romulus or with the Orion, so they are caught completely off guard.
Interesting. So, who's your favorite character so far in this series?
Well, that's a tough one to pick, because it's like trying to pick a favorite child. Because, and also they all represent so many different aspects. It's different personalities and whatnot, and different functions in the story. And so, Scott was the first, and then we came up with Mizar, and we're like, well, we need, kind of our good and bad, Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. So, yeah, I just love them all in different ways.
Gotcha. So I guess this would be your first TV series?
As a series, yep. I had done, like I said, the Quest of the Muscle Nerd documentary. Had a lot of fun with that, met lots of people, and so this just seemed like it could be a really good follow-on after that.
Nice. So you're also in charge of for the Muscle Nerds company as well?
Mm-hmm. That came about many years ago. It started out as just a regular blog, and I was training and dieting and working out and doing a whole bodybuilding regimen for a costume that I was going to do at Dragon Con. And I just thought, I'll do a blog to journey, document my whole journey with this. and just various stories and anecdotes I could just jot down all right through there. Got through it, did the costume, it was a big hit, and the blog ended. And some of my friends, the same friends who wound up producing the Quest of the Muscle Nerd series, they were like, well, Muscle Nerd, Quest of the Muscle Nerd, that's a really great, great name. You should do something else with that. And I'm like, why not? So I'm like going through and I'm like thinking about various aspects, and like in the geek and nerd community, there's almost an animosity to fitness. And I thought, let's break it down. Let's break down those stereotypes and try and blend those two worlds, and try and make it a little more approachable. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched the gym commercials. It's always the most beautiful people, the most perfect physiques working out, and they inexplicably never shed a drop of sweat while they're working out. But I was like, I don't want to work out next to that. So I was like, let's break it down. Let's add humor. Let's make this accessible for people, that run in our circles. And so it kind of grew from there into a whole community. We have our event at Dragon Con and our upcoming one at MomoCon down here in Atlanta, to blend both cosplay and bodybuilding. And we have online presence. I ran for a little while when it first started, a little comic strip, just a little 3-frame comic strips, about once a month. But we were continually confused with Flex Comics. And I talked to the guy who does Flex Comics, and they were confused with us for a while. So I'm like, ours is just a little bit of promo. I can retire that aspect, and they can go on and keep doing that. So, but yeah, that's how Muscle Nerds has grown over the years.
Yeah, because I've seen like the posts about for like the competition you guys do at DragonCon. Like, that's impressive with what people can do to get in shape, but also resemble the characters that they're portraying. Especially, I think Jonathan Carroll as He-Man one time.
Yep, that was part of the original documentary. And because Muscle Nerds already existed as an entity, and I was hitting up Dragon Con, I was like, guys, I would really like to create an event to blend both bodybuilding and cosplay. And it took a long time for me to hear back from them, and eventually they're like, okay, you can do this. And I was telling my friends Matthew and Jared Young, who produced and directed the documentary, about it, and they're like, we got to make a documentary about this. This is too good. So they just followed me along, the whole journey. And my friends, William Davis, Billy, and Jonathan Carroll, who kind of became the two characters in their own right in the documentary. And just following that, all the way to we actually had the event at Dragon Con. It was a big hit. We were always nervous if anyone would be interested. We wound up packing the house. So
very nice, yeah, because that's one thing I find great with that. How for some cosplayers, they really take the time and effort to look the part, and not just with the outfits, but also with the physiques as well. Like I can think of at least 3-4 noteworthy people that have really got the look of Superman down without much padding at all.
Right. And that was part of the genesis for the Muscle Nerd Showdown, as the event's called, is I was at Dragon Con and I saw at one of the costume competitions, they have several, this guy who was doing a Viking character get up on stage, and the guy was absolutely ripped. Obviously a competition bodybuilder, and had dieted, had prepped, whether he was just, like in a regular competition prep and happened to be using it to be in a barbarian costume for Dragon Con, I don't know, but only thing they could score him on was the costume, of which he's supposed to be this warrior that's very, fairly scantily clad. And so I'm like, guys, a lot of work went into that physique. Dieting, training, working out. You have so many aspects it takes to be a competitive bodybuilder, and he's blended that very effectively with cosplay, but they didn't have any way to reward both sides. So we created the showdown that could score on both sides, but we had to keep it balanced. They couldn't just win based on a great cosplay or a great physique. It had to be both.
Makes sense. Like if there's any Bane cosplay, it's not just like, how big it can be, but also like, how authentic the mask can be, as well as like any use of the venom tubes or not, depending on the version of Bane they want to go with.
Exactly. And you do variations. Like when we did the original showdown, which was more or less just an elaborate panel than an actual contest. Jim, who was the Guile character, he's like, I'm doing Guile at the beach. And he had that American flag Speedo, with the Guile flat top wig. And that was, his, physique spin on the character. It was certainly unique.
Well, that's one way to make a good first impression.
Yeah. But the great thing about Dragon Con, MomoCon, most of the con communities, there's no judgment. It's just however you want to express yourself. Show us, your inner geek.
I know what you mean. That's how they felt like. Have you ever been to the Metropolis Festival in Illinois?
I've always wanted to go, but no, I haven't.
That's another great place where it's such a very warm-looking community, and they got like the Superman they got there, Joshua Boldinghouse. Like, he's probably like the biggest guy to ever put on the costume, and I would say like maybe 6'2", 3", somewhere that tall, and I know it's like almost like Christopher Reeve height, but put in like at least 20 more pounds of muscle.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
And I've known several of the regular cosplayers, Joe Mikeston and Jonathan Carroll, and I mean, friends like David Sims, and they all regular Superman goers, and I believe they've all been up there to that. So.
Yeah, it's quite an experience. So just be prepared for having lots of sunscreen, because it gets hot over there during the June.
Well, down here in Atlanta, it's one great thing. If you can do your own muscular physique, so much the better, because muscle suits are hot. And you're down here in the Georgia heat and humidity, you're gonna die.
That's one thing when I ask about your suits. Like, I guess when it comes with the design of the suits, like that's mostly all just you guys in terms of like your physiques. Like, there's not much padding or anything.
Well, I'm getting old, so.
Well, come on, like you look like.
We have to resort to such tactics. But yeah. No, I mean, if I'm doing any type of hero that requires a muscular physique, I do a complete training program. So
some actors, I feel like they should put more effort when it comes to, if they're in official movies, they should put more of an effort to really nail the look of the character. Because, like, what are your thoughts on the whole Robert Pattinson, like, not wanting to, do a training program to be the Batman?
I've got mixed feelings on it. I question the true motives there, but I'm just gonna, I want to be more body positive and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, nobody wants to see body positive. We want to see, this is supposed to be superheroes. They're supposed to be at their pinnacle.
Yeah, I've been mixed because I feel like for Batman, like, he has to be very agile and like, kind of acrobatic, so like he can't be that big and bulky, but at the same time, I mean, like, he's supposed to be trained at like, to be at physical peak.
Yeah, Batman doesn't get winded.
No siree. That's why I feel like, as far as official actors, Ben Affleck definitely got like the look of the character, I think, the best in terms of comic book wise.
I was kind of liked Ben Affleck as Batman. I mean, he got slaughtered by the fans, but I didn't think it was bad. But then again, one of my favorite Supermans is also one of the least liked, is Dean Cain in Lois and Clark.
Yeah, I didn't mind Dean Cain's portrayal. Like, I'm a '90s kid, so I grew up a little bit with that and the '90s animated series.
Yeah, and uh, I, go back all the way to when they did the Superboy series, which was just kind of Superman, and they had to retitle it for licensing issues. But it was just a fun little low budget series. They didn't take itself too seriously. And one thing that helped motivate me on making the Starquake series, I found out the Superboy series that was syndicated so many years ago only cost them, I think, somewhere like $150 to $200,000 per episode. And I'm like, well, shoot, if they could do it that cheap back then, I'm sure we could find funding to do a good show now, where lower cost special effects are so much more readily available.
Yeah, that is a possibility. Yeah, and if you know someone that's good enough to do all those like pro grade special effects, but having to buy, have to reach out to a professional studio, then that's even more of a bonus.
Oh yeah, you can do anything with After Effects, believe me.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Because I have a friend who's making like a mini series as well, and he's definitely pretty good at adding some special effects as well. So I guess you have. So I guess you've been a comic book fan pretty much like all your life.
Yeah, I always seem to like the one-off comic book titles. I liked DC, I liked Marvel, and I had my favorites there. But my true favorites were like Malibu Comics, which was eventually acquired by Marvel later. Like for the Quest of the Muscle Nerd, I did the character Prime, which is from Malibu Comics. The first time I did him, because I actually did him twice at Dragon Con. First time, I was terrified no one was going to know who Prime was. But, even at that point, he'd been out of print for like 13 years. And so I'm like, I still love the character. I don't care. I'm going to do Prime. So did training, dieting, working out, and built that costume up. And I'm like, well, here goes nothing. 10 steps into the main hotel that Dragon Con's home base is. Oh my God, there's a Prime. It's like, okay. So people do remember this character. And it was great because there was no other Prime there.
Yeah, that's a good thing about but with conventions, you're bound to find some people that know pretty much every kind of character, whether they're like popular or not.
Yeah, and even now we've seen, like with Invincible. Invincible was not Marvel, it was not DC, it was Image Comics. I guess probably riding on the coattails of Walking Dead, another one that's not Marvel or DC. And you have like Dark Horse comics that are getting made into series and movies, stuff like that. Hellboy, I believe, is a Dark Horse comic. The Mask, Jim Carrey. Men in Black was a Malibu comic, but I don't know if Marvel kept that one around.
Yeah, I never know these days with almost everything bought by Disney.
Yeah, and that is a tricky thing. When Malibu was bought by Marvel, Malibu was a creator-owned, and Marvel is, of course, studio-owned. So they always ran into rights issues. So.
Gotcha. So Malibu is among your favorite comics?
Malibu, Top Cow, Image. Yeah, always loved kind of the other branding. Yeah, if it comes to DC, I've always loved Captain Marvel, Shazam. I'm old school where he was always Captain Marvel. And I've always loved the Green Lantern and all the Green Lanterns that have come along. As far as for Marvel, I love Gambit. Yeah, I've always loved Deadpool. I've loved Deadpool since long before he was in the mainstream. And so yeah, there's always something in any of them to like.
Yeah, I like some of the good portion of those characters, as well as of course with with Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, because I was pretty much like born when those characters like blew up as far as for cartoons and stuff in the 90s.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And really, after the first Superman movie, I think the comic book genre in Hollywood kind of died there, thereafter. It was Superman, but there wasn't much else. Not until about 1989, when Tim Burton did Batman, I think that it really breathed new life into it. And even then, it was slow going. It was still just Batman. And then a few other things started popping up here and there.
Yeah, that's what they noticed. Like Marvel was trying to make like some movies, like I think Fantastic Four in the 90s and a couple of Captain Americas, like one in the 80s and 90s, but it just didn't reach that level of exposure and attention much like the other two.
Yeah, there were the Roger Corman, Fantastic Four and Captain America, but it's a well-known fact those were license holder movies. They never even intended to have them come out in theaters or anything like that, and they're so low quality. I'm glad they didn't anyway.
Yeah, it's just funny that for Marvel they really got more notice. I think probably like around when they did the Blade series and stuff.
Yeah.
And then eventually, of course, X-Men and the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah. The great thing, I think it's X-Men, where it started to show the filmmakers were just beginning to really pay attention to the source material. They weren't trying to make their own movie. They were trying to make X-Men. That's
Yeah.
the Green Lantern movie, I think, faltered. Is the filmmakers, they were just trying to make their own movie. And these titles have two well-established fan bases to be doing that. You can't just, I'm going to throw out my own version. No, there's lore, there's canon, and you can't just pick and choose.
Yeah, I feel like for the first X-Men movies, like the first two, like maybe they were just like, maybe more the first one, they were trying to do their own thing, but luckily the X-Men is such a big franchise with the themes and what they're going for. It can be interpreted in multiple ways, especially for like the costumes, because normally in the comics they have like either blue and yellow or certain like unique costume, but then for the first movie is like everyone was dressing in black.
And I get that, things that work in an inked 2D world quite often don't work in the real world. And so and we had talked about that with Starquake, is how are we going to make these look good? And because Superman is Superman, and Christopher Reeve is Christopher Reeve, but he put on that suit, and the combination of the two of them, it was awesome. But yeah. I've seen lots of documentaries and stories being told about the original Superman Christopher Reeve's suit, and the level of detail that went into it is not immediately apparent on screen. Like the symbol on the chest, I didn't realize from watching the movie, it's not just an applique that's sewn on. It's actually an inlay into the suit. And that takes a lot of effort to do, building that. The blue material that the suit was made out of was a specially produced material, because spandex and stretchy materials hadn't quite evolved when they made that movie. And they had to have this special material made up in Germany and imported in to make the suit. And it has fine detail in it as well. Not stuff like, Brandon Routh's suit that had all the tiny little S's in it, but it still had its own unique characteristics, not just a bodysuit.
Yeah, and I would say for Brandon Routh, he definitely stand out more with his Kingdom Come suit.
Yes. And my personal opinion, Brandon Routh's Superman, the fault there lies in that Brandon Routh wasn't doing Superman. Brandon Routh was playing Christopher Reeve playing Superman.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I find hilarious with the fans. People complain how Superman Returns, it's just basically the same thing we've seen before. Like there's nothing really different other than just Superman having a kid revealed at the end. But then when we get Man of Steel, it's like, nope, too different. Let's bring it back to how it was before. I'm like, these fans, sometimes they can't make up their minds. Like, what do you want? Do you want like a more extreme dark edginess, or the usual classic, humble kind of Superman?
And this is, another fun one is they always preach, I don't want another origin story. Yet when they, retcon the characters in the movies, well, I don't like that. I want to see the origin, And I'm like, okay, pendulum swings.
Yeah, that's I'm glad for the Batman. It was just a year 2 storyline.
Yeah. I guess, Batman has always remained in the public eye. And so we're probably too close on the heels of the Christian Bale Batman to do an origin story there.
Yeah, and that's why I had no problem with how they did with Ben Affleck's Batman, because for one, it was just like 4 years after Dark Knight Rises. So yeah, we don't need like a young Batman starting out. We can have one that's like been around for several years or so.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not an expert on the Justice League storyline as a comic, but it seems to me, Batman would already be established by the time they form the Justice League.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the comics either. The only one I've familiar with mostly is just with the animated show that I grew up with, which I would say is probably one of the better interpretations of the team.
Yeah, and I've seen the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, and I don't know, there's elements of both versions that I like. So the all-black Superman suit looked cool, but I still like color.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like just between like what Zack Snyder's and Joss Whedon, there's got to be some middle ground where like it can be somewhat edgy, but still have some semblance of color.
Yeah, and it had the great detail, it had the great styling, but I still like the classic, with the trunks and lined capes and everything. Gloves I can do with or without, but I always like masks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, luckily with James Gunn's DCU lineup, it looks like we're gonna go back with the Trunks costume.
We'll see.
Yeah,
it seems like every time I open the internet, there's a new article talking about Henry Cavill, getting fired, and I'm like, you guys are, I think, really making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it is disappointing, mostly just because I feel like they just like screwed him over a bit, like how The Rock worked so hard just to get him involved, at least in a post-credit scene for Black Adam. Then after that, it's like, nope, new direction. He's out.
Yeah, Black Adam is another one that I loved in the DC universe, and I thought for what they did with the Black Adam movie was good. It's not where I think they should have gone with it.
Yeah. Just a little too Terminator-ish, in my opinion.
Yeah, but still, he does have the conflict, and I don't know, because Black Adam started out just as a pure villain versus Captain Marvel, but eventually the character evolved into an anti-hero. And I don't know if they've, outside of Wolverine, if they've really gotten that formula down in Hollywood yet. The anti-heroes are real hit or miss.
Yeah, because like I didn't mind the Venom movies, but it just felt weird of like how they did an origin story of Venom almost perfectly, just taking Spider-Man out of the equation.
I think, did they do that with the Venom comics?
I'm not sure. I'm only going by with the original, where it was like, like Spider-Man had the Venom symbiote, then like
Eddie
after
Brock does.
Yeah, and for Eddie Brock, he was a reporter. He might have done some things that got him fired from his job, so that's where he was like at church. He was like depressed, and then that's when the symbiote came around and bonded with Eddie.
Yeah, the Venom movies, while entertaining, they just kind of turned into a buddy flick.
Yeah, they're basically fighting against like other versions of themselves.
And it's oh, I've got this parasitic symbiont living within me, and we have arguments, and I want to do this, well, I want to do that, and I'm like, is this Butch and Sundance in a comic book? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too familiar with much in the comic aspects of Venom, but from what I've seen, usually with Eddie and the symbiote, it's like they
yeah. I
are
mean,
in unison.
and when I first, saw the Venom storyline was really in the Spider-Man cartoon,
Same.
just in passing, and the symbiote didn't have its own voice. It was just sort of an impression, in within Eddie that it was controlling him, but they didn't have a dialogue back and forth.
Nope.
It's more like their emotions were linked, not their thoughts.
Yeah, pretty much. And for Carnage, like I liked him because it was like pretty much, what if you take Joker and mix him with a symbiote, and Carnage is the result.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good analogy there.
Yeah, because when you look at the original design for, I think his name was the last name was Cassidy for Carnage. His design was influenced by the Joker, just with orange hair.
Yeah, and that crazed, maniacal, psyche.
Yeah, that was the one thing that was disappointing about for Spider-Man No Way Home. I was hoping we'd get like a Sinister Six, not DC's, not Marvel's version of the Fatal Five.
Yeah, Far From Home, I thought was great because I loved, even though he was a relatively minor bad guy, I always loved Mysterio. I thought it was really cool.
Oh no, Far From was good. I meant No Way Home when they had like all the villains together. I was hoping.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I know that's a punch on my nerd card, but yeah, the last Spider-Man I saw was that one.
Oh, but you know the spoilers for that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Believe me, people have talked about it all over the place, and so I'm like, yeah, don't worry, it won't diminish the movie for me at all.
Oh yeah, but that one's definitely great to see, like with nearly all the villains, all the Spider-Man, basically live action version of the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. One I think would do a great job and make a really interesting superhero storyline as a filmmaker would be Bob Zemeckis. He's in it, going, oh yeah, Romancing the Stone, Back to the Future, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and even the Beowulf movie. He's got effects experience, and he's made some really great blockbusters. So if you're listening, Bob.
Yeah, but that's always impressed me with films like with Roger Rabbit, how they did a good job blending with live action performances and animation characters. Like, I feel like that movie is
that back when, long before we had CG, integration and stuff like that. That was still hand-drawn animation that they had to overlay.
Yeah, because it felt like you were really like they were really there. Whereas like the Chip and Dale movie, yeah, because like how they were doing the same thing, but because of the CGI, it still looks kind of fakish. I don't know. It's like it was,
and there's always history of that in filmmaking. Look all the way back to Mary Poppins, where you had Dick Van Dyke dancing with the penguins, and you had Julie Andrews interacting with this whole cartoon world, but it's very layered because they couldn't do anything else back then. They couldn't directly interact. They couldn't shake hands with these two-dimensional characters or anything like that. But still, that's where it started.
Yeah, that's for sure. So one more question is that for Starquake, because right now you're trying to raise funds to have it be shown in 3D. Now it's just for the opening segment to be in 3D.
This is for the next short that we do with it, which is actually the first 10 minutes of our pilot episode that we've written. Is our opening with an epic superhero battle scene, and we want to do that in classic 3D with the anaglyph, the colored glasses, and all that kind of good stuff. And we've found a lot of updated technologies that can really present that very well. Plus, we don't have the money to do like Avatar or anything like that. So, but when we were planning this out, I'm like, you know what? This is superhero stuff. Let's give them as much as we possibly can. I said, let's do 3D. Let's have them flying directly at the screen, and let's have them up in the air and make it feel like they're, coming out of the screen as they do it. And so we're like, yes, that's going to be our aim. If we can get, the Indiegogo fully funded, it will be, truly epic.
Should be quite a show. But I would say that'd be our time for now. Thank you again for joining me on this podcast. And
Thanks for having me.
No problem.
And for everybody who can contribute to the Indiegogo, just simply go to starquakeseries.com and you can make a pledge there.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Be sure to click the link on the description box to donate to the Starquake Indiegogo Fund. Also, click on the thumbnail here to see the 8-minute short they made, as you get a taste to see what's in store for the rest of this series. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel for more content. This is BD Knight, signing off.